Hi, I'm Leon Gorin, president of PEO Leadership, a peer-to-peer leadership advisory firm. We're an amazing community of CEOs, presidents, and senior executives. Ask yourself, are you learning as fast as the world is changing? It's time for Ontario business leaders to band together for counsel and support. It's time for you to tap into the business wisdom of our peer groups and unlock new ways to grow. I want you to come out of this COVID crisis a better leader and your organization ready for what's next. Take the first step at peo-leadership.com. So this morning, we are very excited to welcome Rob Chesnut, the former General Counsel and Chief Ethics Officer of Airbnb. Rob is a graduate of Harvard Law School and the University of Virginia. He worked 14 years with the U.S. Justice Department, where he ran the Major Crimes Unit and prosecuted a wide variety of cases, including bank robberies, kidnappings, murder, and drug trafficking organizations. He handled the prosecution of CIA, FBI, and other employees of the intelligence community for espionage, including CIA employee Aldrich Ames. He is the recipient of the Justice Department John Marshall Award for litigation and the CIA's Outstanding Service Medallion. In 1999, Rob joined eBay as its third lawyer, handling a wide variety of litigation, IP, regulatory compliance for the company globally. In 2004, he was promoted to eBay's executive leadership team as the senior vice president of a newly created trust and safety department. As the founder and head of this department, Rob was responsible for overseeing all site rules and policies for the eBay global community of over 150 million users and building the first e-commerce person-to-person platform. He went on to join Airbnb in 2016, overseeing a team of approximately 125 legal professionals in over 20 offices around the world. It is within Airbnb that Rob really began focusing on intentional integrity and developed a popular interactive employee program, Integrity Belongs Here, that led him to writing and speaking about his new book, Intentional Integrity. Today, Robert lives just outside the Bay Area in wine country and acts as an advisor to Airbnb along with several other internet marketplace startups, including Uber, Upwork, Turo, and Poshmark. I had to read that, Rob. I know you're probably cringing. I read your long bio, but it's so impressive. So that's why I did it. Now, before I begin this session, this is how I envision the sort of the hour unfolding. We'll take 30 minutes, 35 minutes. I'll lead Rob through a bunch of questions, really talking a little bit about his book. I urge you all to use your group chat as you're bringing up questions, and we'll get to them, hopefully within the 30 minutes, 35, and then I'll have you come off mute. Many of you have done this before, and ask Rob the questions directly. So I think we're ready to roll. Rob, I'm gonna start with, and I know I sort of prepped you, but maybe just even giving insight, what do we want everybody to walk away with? 3 takeaways, very high level, then we'll get into the details from today's session. Oh, you're on mute. No worries.
I was trying to spare everyone the leaf blower outside. Thanks for having me, Leon. So the 3 takeaways. Number 1, integrity is a double-edged sword. And by that, I mean, integrity is something that can wreck your brand and your career if you don't get it right. But it can also be wind at your back and propel your business if you do get it right. Number 2 would be integrity is a fundamental responsibility of a top leader. It's all part of your job description, and you need to get comfortable with the uncomfortable idea of talking about it. And number 3, integrity is contagious, but so is a lack of integrity. All right, those are the big 3 takeaways.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Rob. So let's jump in. What does integrity mean to you?
Yeah. You know what? It used to be that idea of doing the right thing even when no one's watching. But even that's not terribly helpful anymore, Leon, because in today's world with cell phone cameras and blogs and the like, it seems like everybody's watching everything. So, you know, for me, I think today it's about doing the right thing and assuming that everything you do is going to be on the front page of the internet newspapers. But no matter what, figure out your North Star, figure out your purpose, and then act and speak according to that. Stay on track.
And what about intentional integrity? Does that differ a little bit from that?
Well, you know what? Intentional integrity, the title of the book really is meant to distinguish what I'm talking about from an old way of thinking about integrity. And the old way of integrity is where you aren't really talking about it or thinking about it in your business. So the old way really is you've got a poster on the wall with a pretty sunset, a lone tree in the distance, and the word integrity underneath, but nobody ever talks about what it means. Or maybe you've got one of those compliance posters, right? One of these things. I love these things. These things are great. They've got the 4-point font. They've got everything you ever need to know about any law or anything related to integrity. And
Hold on, we're going to take a picture of that.
Yeah, this is great. Aren't these wonderful? I'm at the point where I can't even read these anymore, and I'm this close to it. But they hang in all the break rooms over in the corner by the dripping pipes, but nobody reads them. And there's a code of ethics, but the code of ethics is something that you probably stole from some other company online, and you put your own company's name up at the top, and then you emailed it out to everybody and said, check the box. That's the old way of integrity. And that's one where there's no real honest conversation about it. Intentional integrity is the idea that it needs to be a part of your strategy. You need to actually think about it and have a conversation about it within your company.
Oh, that's great. So I got to take you back. I mean, we're going to talk about Airbnb. 36 years, you're chief legal counsel now at Airbnb. You sit down with Brian, and all of a sudden you're thinking about, okay, we need to do something differently here. And you start thinking about ethics and creating the ethics officer. You don't really have a plan yet when I'm reading your book, but you're saying, I've got to do something. What's changed? What took you 36 years to sort of say, okay, hold on a second. We need to
I don't know what I was thinking all those years, but I was sleepwalking through doing integrity the old way. And what really woke me up, I think Me Too was part of it. I think a lot of the issues that Uber had, because Uber is literally right down the street from Airbnb, and they started having a lot of challenges. And there were a lot of other companies and celebrities all facing integrity challenges. I mean, it was coming at the world, I think, at a rate I had never seen before. And I remember, reading one day the latest Uber story and thinking to myself, wow, something like this happened at Airbnb. It sure would be awful. Somebody ought to do something about it. And then I reflected for a minute and thought, wow, I wonder who that somebody would be. And I wonder what they would do. And that led me to go sit down and have a conversation with Brian Chesky, the founder, CEO. And we talked, honestly, like, how do you drive integrity into the culture of a company? And that's a fundamental question. So I'll repeat it. How do you drive integrity into the culture of a company? And I didn't have the answer that day, and Brian didn't either. But Brian, in his typical Brian fashion, looked at me and said, go big. And that, I think, gave me the freedom to think about integrity in a new way. And I just felt there was an urgency in the world at that point that pushed me to think, the old way isn't working. What can we do to protect our brand and then ultimately maybe actually enhance it?
Now, did you already have integrity as one of your values at that time? Like, if you looked at the company values, you walk in the front door, there would be integrity as one of the values.
Oh, it was in the old code of ethics and the like. But look, it was funny. I was looking at WeWork's code of ethics from 2018, and they're talking about integrity in the very first paragraph. But the thing is, nobody reads it and nobody knows what it means. And it's a check the box kind of an exercise. It really isn't having any impact at all. Right. So I think the real issue for us was, how do we get it out of, a paragraph buried in a code of ethics that's 3 links deep into your corporate internet? And how do you get people to really think about it and start acting on it every day?
Okay. And actually maintain a culture. Because one of the things I always think about, and we're going to get into your 6 ways of doing it, but it's like, as you set policies and you look at stuff, and maybe I'm jumping the gun, but it almost sounds like you take the fun, inspiration, excitement, motivation, you zap it right out of a company, because you're now going to really define what integrity means with it, and limitations on what people can do.
Yeah, you know what? I was worried about that a little bit when I first launched the first part of it. I was thinking, how are people going to respond? Are people going to look and say, "Oh no, here's this lawyer coming. This old lawyer is going to come in and start talking about morality to us. That doesn't sound like much fun." I was concerned that particularly this wouldn't play with another generation, frankly. Um, and I was a little worried that, would it play outside of Silicon Valley? How would it play to a global company? And I was, to say pleasantly surprised would be a vast understatement. I would say I was shocked at the response that I got from people inside the company. Um, Literally, what I found was that in talking about values and talking about integrity, I think I hit a nerve, and it resonated with people, even particularly the younger generation, in ways I could have never anticipated. I was having people, I had several people come up to me over the course of time at the end of an integrity talk, literally in tears. Uh, and I wasn't ready for that. And I didn't understand it to begin with. But what I came to ultimately understand is that where you work, it's more than a paycheck for a lot of people, Leon.
Yeah.
Uh, it, it is a place where you are making your life's, impact. I mean, look, when people talk about me, what do they start with? They start about the places I've worked, right? It's the
Yeah.
logos on the LinkedIn. It's the story of your life. And people want to feel like they're having an impact in the world, like they're doing something that is truly valuable. And if they work at a place that has values that are not consistent with their own, um, it troubles them. And in fact, in the old days, Leon, they didn't say anything. They sat on their hands. Maybe I think they were afraid that they would lose their job. Not in today's world. In today's world, if employees see something that's not right inside of a company, uh, they're speaking up. They're talking to each other on Blind. They're talking to each other on Slack. They're tweeting about it. Susan Fowler's blog post for Uber completely changed the trajectory of that company. Um, they're walking out. This is stuff that never would have happened even 5 years ago. And so I think it's because there's a deep desire to do something that has value in the world. And when you actually start talking as a leader about integrity and wanting to operate the right way, to my surprise, uh, it resonates in a very powerful way with people.
Wow. So you walk out of Brian's office and you start formulating a plan. I know you've got it down to the sort of the 6 C's, but how'd you actually, is the 6 C's the magic formula for those in the audience here sitting there and going, okay, I want to move forward. I want to do something. I want to start pushing forward with this, taking just not integrity on the wall, but doing something with it,
Yeah.
meaningful. How do you proceed here?
I would love to tell you that buying my book is going to give your company integrity. The book would be at the top of the bestseller list for months to come. It's not quite that simple. I mean, what I think the book does is it gives companies that sincerely want this at the leadership level a roadmap for how to do it. The book is, if you're looking for Socrates and Plato and the philosophy of ethics, I never took an ethics class. I wouldn't know, and you wouldn't want to read my thoughts about it. But the book's got a lot of practical stuff. So, I mean, when I walked out of Brian's office, the interesting thing was it wasn't rocket science. The first thing that struck me was the canned code of ethics, the compliance poster on the wall. Man, if you're really trying to send a message to people that integrity is important, you'd never do it that way. So if you're just thinking from scratch, if you want to send a message that is important, what would you do? So one thing I did was I thought back to my days at eBay, and my CEO is Meg Whitman. And what Meg Whitman used to do that was really powerful was Meg Whitman, even though she was the CEO of this big, global company, every week Meg would come down to orientation, where we would have new employee orientation. And she would talk for an hour with new employees about what the values of the company were and her vision. And that was really powerful. And I thought, wow, if you want to get people right off the bat and talk about integrity in your culture, why not start their first week? So I started with an integrity talk week for all new employees. And I decided that that's the sort of thing that's too important to let like a mid-level HR person do, frankly. That's something that people need to hear from a leader. And so I started doing a 1 hour integrity talk as part of our orientation. We had 20, 25 classes. And the orientation group looked at me kind of funny when I came down and said I wanted to do this. They said, really, Rob, we want to do an ethics talk by a lawyer? Well, we're not trying to drive people away. And I said, you know what? You guys do blind surveys. Let me try. Let's see what the reaction is. By the third week, it was the #1 class in orientation, ranked, and it was consistently the #1 ranked class in orientation for 2.5 years. And what I learned during this is if you want to talk to people about integrity, you've got to be a storyteller because people turn out the law stuff really fast. If there are any lawyers in the audience, I hate to break it to you, but people really don't want to hear the legal definition of what constitutes, an atmosphere, a sexual charged atmosphere. Like they don't want to hear it. So what we did was we actually picked a dozen examples, not hypotheticals. We picked real things that had happened at Airbnb, where employees had been faced with integrity, ethical dilemmas. And we didn't use names, but we talked about the scenarios and why they were a problem or why they weren't a problem. And people really engage with stories, particularly things that actually come up in real life. And people enjoyed the conversation and learned from it and got enthusiastic about it. And at the end, by the time we started looking at the reviews, it was getting, I think, an average 4.7 on a scale of 1 to 5. Comments like, I have never heard anyone at any company actually talk about integrity. You have no idea what it means to me to be at a place that cares. Or how powerful is it for a leader to stand up in front of the room and talk about this? Wow, right? And so I think #1, a big message here is people want to hear from leaders. It's a responsibility of leadership to actually talk about the importance of doing the right thing because people take their cue from leaders.
Yeah, and I think that was your #1 point, right? It starts at the top with these leaders. So, and I know for many in the audience, I mean, they're not the size of Airbnb, they're not the size of the Ubers of the world, but just them as the leader being able to do something, open the communication. That's the starting point.
It is. In fact, there's no better time to do this than when a company is smaller. I mean, I think it's hard to turn around Google and Facebook and the like right now and change the culture. But when a company's smaller, that's when you should be thinking about your North Star.
Right.
Every company needs a purpose, and profit is not purpose. Okay, profit is something that businesses all need, but it's not your reason to exist. You need a reason to exist why your company is good for the world. That will inspire employees and customers, and you've got to be able to articulate it. And you should start right from an employee's first week. So, I think when you're smaller, you can stand up in front of one room and have that conversation. At Airbnb, even it was a little challenging. I had to do not only the employee orientation, I went on a world tour. I literally got on airplanes and visited every one of Airbnb's offices all around the world and had the same talk. And I got the same reaction from employees like, wow, this must be really important if the general counsel is coming out to talk about it. And how cool is it to be part of a company where this is the message from the top? That's inspiring to us.
Right. So let's move to the second one. And that's really, you're talking about customizing. And I think that relates to understanding the values of your business first, right?
Yeah.
But maybe talk to us like, developing that code of ethics and thinking about it within your organization. And I think that's where the word custom comes from
Yeah.
that you're using. Diversity on the team, diversity in the customer space. How do you grab everything to determine what should be in this code of ethics?
Well, I think you got to get away from the idea that it's one person. In other words, you don't want to be like Moses going off to the mountaintop and coming back with the commandments on a big stone and saying, here it is, everybody. I know what ethics means, and this is the way everybody's going to act. That doesn't work in today's environment. Some things about integrity are simple. Lying, cheating, and stealing, we can all agree. But I think a lot of stuff about ethics is gray. And a lot of it depends on your individual perspective, how you were raised, what are your life experiences. So if you want something that's applicable to a larger group, you need to get a group of diverse folks together. And by diverse, I mean gender, race, also function. We got a couple of people who are engineers, marketing, customer support, finance, and we put the issues on the table and talked about them. And I'll give you an example of the way to have a conversation about this stuff. Let's take something like accepting gifts. Right? That's something that's in every code of ethics. What gifts can an employee accept from a third-party vendor? There's no one right answer here. The answer can depend really on the culture of your company. Take Walmart, for example. Walmart has a rule. Their employees can accept nothing from third-party vendors. And I mean nothing. I've been in a meeting with somebody from Walmart where if you give them a bottle of water, they pull $1 out of their pocket. Why? Well, the reason is because Walmart has a fundamental mission. They know what their mission is. Their mission is low prices every day for customers. And they know that if their employees are accepting gifts, how are those gifts ultimately paid for? Well, they're in the cost of goods sold to Walmart. That raises prices. Walmart doesn't want anything that raises prices. So Walmart says no gifts for employees, no entertainment. We're not accepting. Compare that to Airbnb. Airbnb has a very different mission. Airbnb's mission is around connecting human beings who are from different parts of the world, right? Helping people from different backgrounds and different cultures connect with each other in a very human way. Well, in order to do that, something like having a cup of coffee or sharing a meal together is critical. So for Airbnb, really, it's about allowing some amount of entertainment and token gifts, so long as it doesn't influence business decisions. But you want to encourage that because that's consistent with our mission. So those are the sort of conversations you have. And we had conversations around alcohol. We had conversations around romantic relationships, the uncomfortable stuff, the stuff that nobody talks about.
Romantic relationships, because you basically, I think at Airbnb, you said no to that, right?
Well, here's what we thought about. I walked into an executive team meeting one day after doing some reading about Me Too and going out and talking to people who were fighting of sexual harassment and who had been victims of sexual harassment. And I talked to the executives and said, look, so many times leaders at companies have fallen from grace because they've gotten involved in a romantic relationship with a lower level employee or a vendor. They've wrecked the lives of that employee. They've lost the respect of their peers and people within the company. And you really can't have a relationship because there's this imbalance of power. The junior person is always going to be thinking, what happens if I say no? Because their career's at stake. So I looked around the room and said, I've got a proposal for everybody on the executive team. There were 12 of us. We're the ones that run the company. I said, I propose that we should all agree that we are not going to engage in any romantic sexual relationship encounter of any kind with any employee or vendor, period. Right? Not even a quote unquote consensual one. And there was silence in the room, right? One person said, oh, Rob, well, we're all married or in relationships anyway, so that shouldn't matter. I said, well, it shouldn't matter, but I read over and over again that that's not stopping anybody. So what do you think? We went around the room. We all looked at each other in the eye and everybody said, I'm in. All right. Now, what did that
Now,
mean?
a question for you, Rob, on that.
Yeah.
What's the average age of all those executives compared
You know
to,
what?
when you think about a 20-year-old coming to join your business, right? Coming out
Well,
of university,
now
24.
this is the senior team, Lauren, right? So these are
Right.
the older folks. I'll talk about the junior folks in a minute. We
Yeah.
start at the top because I think setting the right example starts at the top. So
Yeah.
by the way, the very top is where you have the biggest problem because you have the power imbalance, right?
Right.
And by the way, you also have something that's known in the military as the Bathsheba syndrome. What's the Bathsheba syndrome? The Bathsheba syndrome is that people in power, people who are very successful in their careers, actually develop psychologically a belief that they are entitled to things, that they can manipulate situations, and that they can get through anything. Okay. That, in other words, success carries with it the seeds of your downfall if you're not aware of it. So, the biggest problems around sexual harassment start at the top of a company among its top leaders. So, we decided to deal with that issue among the leaders first. And after we all bought in and we all agreed, I put it in the code of ethics and we talked to the company about it. And I don't think we broke any hearts in the company. Like, oh, no, yeah, now we can't date one of the executives, right? What I think we did do is we sent a message that executives are not going to use their position for sex. And by the way, if they do, the consequences are going to fall on the executive because you broke your word to the others in the room, right? So that meant it's a lot less likely to happen because we had a direct, honest conversation with each other. We then went out to the rest of the company and said, if you are a leader, if you're a manager of a team, you may not engage in any romantic relationship with anyone in your span of control. Again, because of the power imbalance. Not if something develops, we'll work it out. It is simply because of the power imbalance, it's your responsibility to make sure nothing develops. And that's your responsibility if that comes along with being a leader. And then the third thing we did was we said for everybody else, we have one final rule, and that is ask someone out once. If you get a no, you've got to drop it. You can't keep asking someone out and bugging them over and over again because this isn't a bar. At a bar, the other person can walk away. This is actually the other person's career. This is their place. And we need to respect that. So if you get a no, even a nice no, even oh, I'd love to, but my dog is sick, or I'd love to, but my parents are coming in from out of town. That's a no. That means you've got to drop it. If they're really that interested in you, they can ask you out the one time.
No, that's great. I love that. So at the end of the day, when you came out of that, you've developed that code. I'm curious, how long did it take you to get that list down? And how long is this list in terms of the code?
Yeah, you know what? The code's not that terribly long. There are only about a dozen key issues. What we did was we focused on the dozen things that we know from our experience are most likely to come up, right? Excessive alcohol that leads to problems, right? Excessive alcohol at a work event, romantic relationships, gifts from vendors, gifts to government employees, conflicts of interest. You know, their list isn't that long, but giving employees some specific guidance about how they're to handle those situations, that's what people need and what people actually want. So we had the uncomfortable conversations about them.
And what about the ones that are, those are internally focused? What about the ones that are externally focused with customers? And are you structuring it where it's almost 85, 90% structured, and then I'm giving them 10% leeway to use some professionalism experience? Because I'm worried about the gray areas too, right?
Yeah.
Especially from a customer facing perspective. Did you
Yeah,
run
you know, we try to eliminate gray in the things that come up commonly, simply because ambiguity is the enemy of integrity. And here's why, Leon. You know what? I used to think, well, let me just ask the question to the group. How many people here have integrity? Looking out here, seeing some hands. If Folks, you can throw it in chat if your camera's off. How many people in this group have integrity? Hands up everywhere. When I do this talk, everybody raises their hand, right? We all think we've got integrity. I used to think that there are good people and bad people, that the good people have integrity and the bad people, we'll weed them out with a good interview question, right? Or they will reveal themselves by making some terrible mistake. Then I went to spend some time with Dan Ariely. Dan Ariely is a guy, some of you may have heard of Dan. He's a professor of behavioral science at Duke University. He studies dishonesty. He has a movie called Dishonesty, TED Talks, books, right? So I go to hang out with Dan Ariely. And Dan teaches me that I'm thinking about it the wrong way. Dan does this experiment, Leon, and he fills up a room with people and gives them a sheet of math problems and says, I'm not going to give you enough time to do all the problems. Just start working on the math problems. When we say stop, stop. Okay. People do the math problems, they stop. Dan then says, I want you to take your sheet of math problems one by one, come up to the front of the room, put your math sheets in the shredder that's right here. And then as you're leaving the room, tell the proctor how many math problems you did. So people go up one by one, they shred the math problems. And he says, oh, by the way, I'm going to give you $1 for every problem that you say you did. So people put it in the shredder, they walk out, they tell the proctor hands out the money. Now, what Dan didn't tell people was he modified the shredder a little bit. It only shreds the outer edge of the piece of paper. He actually knows exactly how many math problems you did.
Yeah.
How many people lie? Throw it in the chat. What percentage of people do you think lie in that very simple scenario, right? Filling out, doing math problems, putting it in the shredder, buck a problem as you walk out the door. What percentage of people lie in that kind of a scenario? Let's jump into the chat, see what the numbers look like. 60, 75, 40, 50, 50, 50, 70. Wow, we've got some cynical people. The answer is, the answer is 70% of people lie. 70%. Who lies more, men or women?
Men. No.
It's great. Everybody, men and women,
men.
they all say men, right? The truth is, no difference. Men, women, same thing. Race, gender, nationality. He's done this with tens of thousands of people. 70% of people lie. Now, most people, when they do this, they don't lie by a lot. They do what Dan calls fudging. What's fudging? Fudging is 1, 2, 3 problems. Now, people tend to fudge in their own self-interest. When they're confronted with an ethical issue, an ethical dilemma, they tend to fudge toward their own self-interest, but only so much as they can do it and still feel good about themselves. That's the key. You've still got to be able to feel like you're still a good human being, right? Yep. So when you do this, as long as you can still feel good about yourself, you can talk yourself. Can you rationalize it? Oh yeah, I was about to finish that last problem. I had it in my head. I saw other people were still writing. I put my pencil down. Or I got a late start because my pencil broke. Or, they're not paying me very much for this experiment, right? They'll do it by a few. They fudge. Now, from that, oh, and by the way, there's another great example. Dan takes a bunch of Coke machines. You guys all know the Coke machine, right? When I was a kid, you used to put in like a quarter, right? You put in some money, you hit the button and the Coke comes out. So Dan takes a bunch of Coke machines. He puts a big sign on the front of them that says, if this machine is malfunctioning in any way, please call this number. It's an 800 number. Free call, right? Dan then tinkers with the Coke machine so that when you put your money in, the money comes right back out and you still get your Coke. Free Cokes. Dan puts the Coke machines out everywhere. How many people call the 800 number? How many people call it? How many call? Nobody calls the number Exactly right. No phone calls.
You must have done it in high school.
Right. You know what? The average person takes 3 or 4 Cokes. No one calls. Why? Because everybody's been ripped off by a Coke machine. Everybody's put their money in at some point in life and not gotten a Coke. So people view this as a karma opportunity to get back all of the Cokes that they never got in life, right? They can rationalize. Dan found that people who are highly intelligent or highly creative are actually more likely to have integrity issues around fudging because they're better able to think of a rationalization for why what they're about to do is okay. So the real interesting question is, we know that all of us are subject to integrity challenges. We all are looking at problems all the time through our own eyes, and we tend to be biased, and we are going to fudge a little bit naturally. It's going to be our natural inclination to fudge a little bit in our own self-interest. We all think we got integrity, but in reality, it's a constant struggle between doing what's something in our self-interest and still wanting to feel good about ourselves. So Dan tries another version of the experiment, different group, hands out the math problems. Then he says, before you start doing the math problems, I want you to write down as many of the 10 commandments as you can remember. Go. What does Dan learn when he starts the experiment with the 10 commandments? Well, the first thing he learns is that nobody can remember all the 10 commandments. Most people can't even remember half of them. But it doesn't matter because something really interesting happens. Cheating virtually disappears when he starts the experiment with the 10 commandments. When you remind people of their better selves, when you set up an environment where people are thinking about ethics and integrity, particularly when people think that everyone around them is acting with integrity, then people themselves will act with integrity. In other words, integrity is contagious. If you create an environment where people believe that there is integrity around them and where people talk about integrity, people are more likely to act with integrity. On the other hand, if people feel like everyone around them is cheating and playing games, cutting corners ethically, that makes it easier for them to rationalize. And they are more likely to behave that way. So in other words, integrity is contagious, so is a lack of integrity.
That's great. Great examples. Thank you, Rob. The group chat, you guys are all typing in now. So start typing in your questions for Rob as well. And we're going to go to some questions. And as you're doing that, Rob, are you able to share, again, I come back to these gray areas, right? Are there any things that stick in your head that were really difficult things that you were confronted with and that were challenging that you could share with us?
Yeah, you know what? Every day, every day things come up. I'll give you one example of a public one. Back in 2016, I had been general counsel for a month, and we started seeing reports online about discrimination on Airbnb. That is, some hosts were actually turning guests away based on the color of their skin. There was a hashtag, Airbnb while black. And some guests were reporting they were having difficulties. Now, I think this was a big surprise to people in the company. It was a painful episode. It gained steam. People started writing articles about it. A couple of professors started doing their own experiments online with this. Lawsuits started coming in. So, like a good lawyer, I went off to start doing my legal research. What is Airbnb's legal responsibility if a few hosts are unconsciously or consciously racist? In fact, do laws around discrimination even apply if someone is just renting out a room in their home for a few days? So I go off and do my research. I come back to meet with Brian Chesky. First big meeting with Brian. I start going through the law about what I think Airbnb's legal responsibility is. Brian holds up his hand and says, "Stop. I don't care." I'm like, "What? What do you mean you don't care?" Brian said, "Rob, if this sort of thing is going on our platform, we are failing as a company. Our mission is to connect people. We're here, we exist to help promote immersive travel where people from different backgrounds and different cultures actually get to know each other. If discrimination is happening on our platform, we're failing in our mission. And Brian said, I don't care what the law is, we're fixing it. And we went on a journey. Big teams, lots of experiments. We lost a number of users. We did some things. At one point, we required every user to take a non-discrimination pledge. It wasn't required by the law in many places where we did business, but we didn't care. We did it anyway because it was consistent with our mission. We lost 1.1% of our user base who refused to agree to that simple pledge. But we really believe that you've always got to make decisions that are consistent with your North Star. And ultimately, it's going to be the best thing for your company and for your customers and for your brand. So that's what we did.
Oh, that's great. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing. Before we head into the Q&A portion of this webcast, first, a brief note about PEO leadership from one of our members.
At PEO Leadership, I'm surrounded by other business leaders who challenge me to become better.
Les Mandelbaum, founder and CEO of Umbra.
Leaders really need to step outside their world and get new perspectives.
PEO Leadership is more than peer-to-peer advisory. It's a community of top executives with global experience.
Our retail landscape is rapidly changing. PEO Leadership has been vital in helping us navigate through this.
The time to step up and lead is now. Go to peo-leadership.com.
Let's go to a question. Jason, you want to come off mute? I know you got a short question, but just come on in. You can join the conversation.
It's a simple question, and I think the answer is pretty realistic. But I think one of the most obvious sporting analogies of if everybody does it, it's okay is Lance Armstrong. And what are your thoughts on that?
Totally. Lance Armstrong is just one example of this sort of stuff. I'm sure Lance Armstrong, if we had been doing this presentation 20 years ago, Lance Armstrong would have been raising his hand because he would think he has integrity. And I'm sure he started off small, right? I'm sure he started off with something that was just a little boost, right? Nothing big, just, maybe on the edge of the rules. Didn't explicitly violate a rule. And what happens scientifically is when you first start fudging, your brainwaves jump, okay? But each subsequent little fudge, your brainwaves settle out. In other words, it is easier. Once you start to fudge, it becomes very easy to do subsequent little things to keep going. And pretty soon you fudge a little bit, fudge a little bit, fudge a little bit, fudge a little bit, fudge a little bit. And pretty soon you're way out there. You're doing something that's way off the charts ethically, but it started with a little thing. And a great way to rationalize the behavior is, well, in the beginning in particular, well, there's no rule on this, right? It doesn't really explicitly say it. Or the other thing is, look, everybody's doing something like this. Everybody's doing it. I just need to do it just to be able to level the playing field. This is actually fair. In fact, if I don't do it, it's almost not being ethical, right? So Lance Armstrong is just one example of so many. It starts with fudging. It starts with rationalizing. And it often starts because integrity or a lack of integrity is contagious.
Do you think he could have won without actually doing what he did?
You know what? I do believe that he wasn't the only one. In fact, based upon everything I've read, I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that wasn't cheating, right? Back in that era. So he might not have been able to win if he were competing at an unlevel playing field. The real interesting question would be if everybody were at a level playing field and nobody were cheating, would he still be able to win? And look, I'm not a cyclist, but I think he was a pretty extraordinary athlete. And I think he probably if everybody had been playing it straight, I think he probably would have been very competitive and maybe even great. We could have the same conversation about Barry Bonds in baseball, right? So we won't ever really know for sure. But what I do believe is that you are deeply influenced by what you think other people around you are doing.
Great. Gord, let's get you off mute and ask your question as well.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here. So my question is, does contagious integrity spark higher productivity within a company? And if so, how?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what you should do is Google a series of studies by Accenture. Accenture actually pretty recently did a study of studies, like 100 studies around, is there a correlation between companies that appear to have integrity and how those companies perform? And what's really interesting is that the results are very consistent. Over and over again, studies demonstrate that companies that operate with this higher purpose and operate by what most norms would define as integrity outperform the market, and they outperform their competitors. Why? Well, there's several factors. One is the employees. What you find is that they are better able to attract and retain top talent. Their top talent is more engaged and inspired by a mission. We also find that customers are similarly inspired. We are now living in an age of conscious consumerism. Conscious consumerism means consumers actually care about the companies that they spend money with. If a customer is doing business with a company and they find out that that company has values that are very different from their own, they're going to move their money. However, if a consumer believes in the values of the company where they're doing business, not only will they spend more money with that company, but they become evangelists for the company. They become enthusiastic ambassadors, right? And by the way, if you are ethical, what they have found is that there's a strong correlation. Your audit costs are lower, your regulatory costs are lower, right? And you are far less likely to have a damaging brand incident. So for all these reasons, there's value in values. In other words, in the old days, people used to say, oh, it's a dog eat dog world out there. Business is tough. You know, nice guys finish last. The reality is that you are not maximizing your financial potential as a company if you are not thinking about integrity.
That's great. Thanks, Gord, for the question. Natasha, you've got a question.
Hi, Robert. My question is, how can you set up ethics within a team in the same effect that writing the 10 Commandments had? Well,
The best way to do it is to give people on the team input into what the rules are. Listen to people. So the 10 Commandments was quite powerful, obviously, because I think it was very well communicated and it made sense. So work together with a diverse team to create your own code of ethics that's written in your company's language, that has your company's values and mission woven throughout, even the branding. At Airbnb, for example, we didn't call it our code of ethics. What we did is we used the phrase, integrity belongs here. Why did we use that phrase as our title? Because Airbnb's mission is belonging, to increase belonging. So we use the word belonging even in our branding around the program. We made it something that felt Airbnb. We gave a broader group of employees input into writing that code. And then we communicated it by having a leader talk about it so that it wasn't just an HR check the box. This is one of the executive team members coming and personally talking to you about it. Leaders, by the way, have a powerful influence on integrity. I like to say that leaders are the thermostat, not the thermometer. A thermometer takes the temperature of a room. A thermostat sets it. A leader, by their words and actions, is actually creating the integrity temperature, the integrity environment within a company. So if a leader is stomping around saying, hit this number no matter what, we've got to hit this sales figure number, or we've got to get this product out. I don't care how you do it. Don't tell me how you do it. Just get it done. What are they saying? They're basically saying, if you got to cut some ethical corners, go ahead. If you act that way, you are setting the ethical temperature at the thermometer. You're setting the thermostat over on one side. On the other hand, I'll give you an example. Ben Horowitz. Ben Horowitz famous venture capitalist, told me when he was CEO, every quarter, he would sit down face to face with his CFO with the numbers. They would never do it by phone, never by email. Face to face, next to each other with the numbers. Ben would always, as a ritual, look at his CFO and say, is there anything in these numbers that makes you uncomfortable? Anything in here that you think is misleading? Anything that you felt pressured to do? Anything in here that's not standard accounting, that's on the edge? Let me know. Because Ben would say to the CFO, we might miss a number. Our stock price might go down. We might even lose our job, but we're not going to go to jail. Now, when a CEO specifically talks about doing the right thing and following the law, that sets the thermostat on the other side and has a powerful influence on the entire company.
That's great. Thank you. Todd, can you come off mute? I'll let you ask the question.
Good morning, Robert. Thanks for being with us today. Question I had was about, what role does the notion of ethics play at a very tactical kind of customer service level? And in the spirit of storytelling, I'll make this very brief. Recent family wedding where numerous people were not treated as well as they thought they should be in terms of cancellations by Airbnb. And I'm a raving fan, by the way, of Airbnb. Yeah. I'm a big user, so I'm not trying to be disrespectful in asking this question, but it seemed at the very tactical frontline level that the folks were really working from a rule book without using the judgment that you spoke about. And there didn't seem to be an exception process to loop people back to a higher level and drive the sort of ethics and the right judgments. Not everyone on the front line is going to have the level of ethics you want, even though you try, but there didn't seem to be a proper loop back up to a higher level. And it's left a number of people, a significant number of people people who used to be raving fans will tell everyone that will listen how upset they are. So
great point.
Tactical level. Yeah.
Integrity is a challenge, and it's gray, and you're not always going to get it right. But let me talk about the refund issue, because this is another great example of a tough integrity challenge. Back when the pandemic hit, each host on Airbnb is allowed to set their own cancellation policy, right? So they are the ones that get to decide, do you get a refund and how much of a refund do you get depending on when you cancel? It's pretty standard through the industry that there could be different levels, right? Hotels are generally more flexible. Apartment rentals, particularly in exotic locations, tend to have much stricter cancellation policies. So when the pandemic hit, we suddenly had a lot of customers who had reservations, but they couldn't go because travel would have actually spread the virus. And in fact, it might have even been illegal to travel. So what do you do? Because you got these contracts. These are legally, these are things that the guest agreed to that the host set. So what Airbnb did was, we looked at, and we believe that our customers, our guests, our host, even the world are all stakeholders. And we want to try to do the right thing. So, but you're never going to make everybody happy, because if you break the contract, right? If you tell the guest you don't have to go and you don't have to pay, you're breaking the contract between the guest and the host. And now the host is angry. Now the host feels like you don't have integrity. The host now feels that, hey, wait a minute, I made a deal with the guest. Who are you to come in and break it up? So you're in a no-win situation in there, because if you do nothing, the guest is going to say, hey, wait a minute, not fair. We've got a pandemic. If you break it, the host is going to say, hey, wait a minute, I was counting on that money. I have to make a payment. I have to make a mortgage payment on this. So you have to kind of start with the idea that you cannot, as Airbnb, win in that situation, because both sides have a point. What Airbnb did do is, when the pandemic first hit, we did decide to break the contracts. We said that everybody that had a place where there was a strict cancellation policy, the change in circumstances was so dramatic that we were going to allow cancellations. Now, that made our host community very upset, right? even though that seems like a very reasonable thing to do, the hosts are like, hey, wait a minute. We made a deal. We were counting on this money. So what Airbnb did was Airbnb set aside $200 million, I believe, $200 million of Airbnb's money. Didn't have to do it. But it took that $200 million and it told all the hosts, we're going to give you 25% of whatever you lost due to our actions. So we're going to help try to compensate you. We're going to try to be fair. We're going to try to do something for the host and something for the guest. And then we said from this point forward to everybody, look, we're not going to break these agreements anymore because that's a big step to break them. So everybody else now, you have to understand the pandemic. You have to understand the circumstances, do what's best for you, but we can't keep coming in and breaking contracts like this. So I'm guessing the circumstance was in your situation, I'm sure there was a pandemic related issue. And I'm sure the guest circumstances were such that they didn't want to go through with it. But you have a legal contract on the other hand with a host that will be very angry and upset and say you have no integrity if you do break it. So it's challenging and it's gray. I get it. And I would say that the company obviously tries to get it right, because it's not like, Airbnb's, financially Airbnb's not making a lot of money either way, but it does illustrate the challenges.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. What happened in this particular case is the homeowner went dark on Airbnb, and Airbnb wasn't prepared to step up and refund because the homeowner disappeared and left the platform. So but your explanation helps understand the it's not quite as simple as it appears from the side.
It can be challenging, but I will say I'm not saying we got it right either. Like this stuff's hard. What you try to do is you try to have integrity with your policies, because you can't let each individual rep. Obviously there are 1,000 reps all over the world, and you can't let each one decide for themselves what is integrity, because you'll get a bunch of wildly different answers, right? You try to have policies that have integrity, and sometimes we fail.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. I'm going to get one last question here. Rhonda, come on off mute and please ask Rob your question. Oh, I may have lost Rhonda. I heard Rhonda. All right. Nope. Maybe not.
Rhonda, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and anybody on this call can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to connect with any of you. If I didn't get to your questions, I do a post about integrity every day on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to continue the conversation with me and reach out if I can help you.
Rob, on that note, I just want to thank you so much. I actually now understand. I was always worried at the beginning, how's a lawyer going to go in and talk about integrity to all the employees and make it fun? And you've done it successfully in this situation as well. You took a bunch of business leaders here. You really opened up the dialogue, and it was fantastic to have you here. In fact, you're probably not even really a lawyer, are you, Rob? Come on.
I don't practice right now, so it doesn't count.
It's all great. Well, thank you so much. And just in closing, if you're interested in any of our The Way Forward live webcasts, please visit us at peo-leadership.com. You'll find a number of our recorded past webcasts that have included Professor Janice Stein, Professor Rosabeth Cantor, Professor Michael Beer, both from Harvard, Joe Jackman, Harry Kramer, Dr. Greg Wells, Rishad, the list goes on. And so they're out there. You can definitely listen to them as a podcast. You can listen to them on YouTube and see the visual as well. Next month, we take a break from our Way Forward live webcast, and instead we focus on our long-awaited virtual 2020 PEO annual leadership conference, Thriving in a Brave New World. If you'd like to, you'll have a chance to participate and learn from over 1,500 C-level executives. Yes, it is in a virtual format. It is possible. And in addition to learning from some of the top thought leaders, we've got Simon Sinek, Seth Godin, Ambassador Susan Rice, and Dr. Robin Hanley Defoe. We still have a few tickets available. Please just go to the website. You can contact us there and see if we can get you a ticket or not. I want to wish you all a fantastic rest of the day and a wonderful last weekend in October. Thank you again for joining us today. Thank you, Rob.
Take care.